morning YouTube, or whatever time it happens to be when you watch this from the future. My name is Jen. Welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to have you here. Today, I thought maybe I should touch on coronavirus and having a service dog during coronavirus. Of course, I'm quarantined most of the time, but every once in a while, I do need to go out for things like the grocery store, and I have decided during quarantine to not bring my service dog to the grocery store. The decisions that we need to make during coronavirus are pretty tough ones to make because even if you make exactly the right decision, you're still just playing with odds. You don't have any guarantees in any direction or another, and I feel like in times like these, even the doctors and the experts can't say anything for certain. So opinion videos like this one are pretty important. Opinion videos, please don't take what I say as fact. So today I'm going to go over the step-by-step of how I arrived at this decision and why I think it was the right decision for me, and maybe that'll help you make your decision whether it ends up being the same answer as me or the opposite. It wouldn't be a momming with migraine video if Buddy didn't show up, so here he is. Hey pups, thank you. Good check. Good check. That lick on my leg was a POTS alert because I stood up to come down here and find him. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Up until now, I've kind of been avoiding the topic of coronavirus because I feel like we're all very swamped with COVID news, and I really didn't want to add to it because I'm sick of hearing about it, so I really didn't want to talk about it. But I do realize that I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because in addition to the same decisions to quarantine and when to risk going out to grocery shop and all of those choices, I also had some choices to make around the service dog and whether or not to work him. One more time for the people in the back. I'm a humble rando on the internet, and I am not responsible for anything that you decide to do during your quarantine. I hope you guys appreciate what I go through for you. I have to move these lights around literally like 6 times a video because every time I move, I have to move them. And I know that the lighting isn't very good when I'm sitting in front of my bed, but that's because I haven't gotten an extension cord and the wire for the lights doesn't totally reach over to where I need the light to be bright enough for the sunlight on one side to like fill in that shadow on the other side. So I'm really sorry that that lighting is harsh, but you should see it without the light being however many feet away from me. Maybe in the future I'll use an extension cord and you'll notice the improvement. My concerns with COVID are kind of threefold. The first one is the same as everybody else. It can be deadly. Of course, it's terrifying. I know that it can also be very mild, especially in young people, but it can also be very not mild. The second one is that I am at potentially a little bit higher of a risk because I do have neurological conditions. So that can make it harder for me to fight off infections when they do happen. And number 3 is that my more serious symptoms that I have are actually undiagnosed. If I were to get COVID and be hospitalized, my main concern is that some underlying thing would cause complications just because we didn't know that I had that underlying thing. And I think a perfect example of that is EDS. I am suspected for EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but I hope I sounded confident saying it. So I'm just gonna call it EDS. EDS can make you more resistant to anesthesia. So if I needed emergency surgery, obviously not for COVID, but for whatever reason, if I needed emergency surgery and we didn't know that I had EDS, but I was more resistant to anesthesia, obviously that would be really, really bad. So if I were to be hospitalized with COVID and if I were to be in some kind of critical condition, I would definitely worry that maybe the doctors would make a call that would be right for somebody else, but wouldn't be right for somebody with one of my underlying undiagnosed conditions. I've said it before on my channel, I really do feel like knowledge is power, and in the case of health concerns, I feel like knowledge is safety. And although I realize all of these things are unlikely, I'm not really down to increase my chances of dying at the ripe age of 28. Speaking of dying, let's talk about anxiety really quickly. Just to give you an idea of the kind of person that I am, I don't really have a lot of anxiety around COVID. I think that my history in biochemistry and in working with pathogens has definitely made me more calm during this pandemic than a lot of the other people that I've been seeing. Most of my biochemistry work was in blood and urine testing. Some of that was your standard blood tests like cholesterol and thyroid, but a majority of the work that I did in biochemistry was on pathogens, and specifically antibiotic resistance to pathogens. We had to have a lot of bacteria that were resistant to different antibiotics, or resistant to all of the antibiotics. So not only was I getting exposed to these bugs all the time in huge numbers in petri dishes and in culture, they were also some of the most dangerous bugs in the world. And they were my best friends full-time for almost a decade. In fact, during the Ebola outbreak, I developed a 35-minute test for Ebola in my lab. Needless to say, I'm not so spooked. When you're around something a lot, you get a little bit numb to it, even if maybe you shouldn't. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take Ebola seriously or that you shouldn't take COVID seriously. All I'm saying is that for me, as far as my anxiety levels and making this choice, maybe it's important that you understand that that's my background when I approach an illness. In the cases of big decisions like this, where there is no right answer, I feel like the more information we have, the merrier. And I'd love to hear from you for the same reason that I think you should hear from me. So if you have a service dog, whether you're working your dog or not, I'd love to hear in the comments below. And there are probably a lot of other people who are curious about your opinion too. Do you think you could come do me a favor real quick? Oh, thank you. I was wondering if you could refill my water so that I don't need to stand up and get palpitations. Thank you, honey. Isn't he sweet?
I'll take a break soon and actually work, but...
Okay, I'm about halfway, just so you know. Once again, I'm not a medical or a scientific professional, so please take everything I say as 100% my opinion and not fact. I've read a little bit of conflicting information on whether or not dogs can get the Rona. On the one hand, I heard that they can't. On the other hand, I heard that there was a Pomeranian whose owner had COVID, and the dog did test weekly positive for the virus. The dog was asymptomatic, but I don't know whether or not that means that they could carry it. Maybe the dog just had some weak antibodies from being exposed to it, but maybe the dog was able to transmit it. Who knows? This goes back to those issues with this virus just not being very well understood. And nothing that I've ever done has ever indicated that the second a virus touches the surface of an animal that can't be infected, it's just magically going to die. My better safe than sorry instincts in this case would say, let's just assume that if Buddy did touch the virus in a store while he was working, then he could bring it back into my home and have the virus still be alive and viable. I'd like to politely remind you, just to save my own butt, that I don't know if it's true whether dogs can be infected or not, and I don't even know if it's true that a Pomeranian did test weekly positive. I just know that it's not worth my life and my well-being to risk it. Waiting for my stomach to stop gurgling. So the next thing to consider in my decision-making process about whether or not to bring Buddy out was, what are the odds that he would come in contact with the virus? It's pretty clear that there's no way for me to guess that. When Buddy goes to a grocery store, he heels next to me, but what if he turns around and his tail touches the cart? What if somebody else comes and pets him? Because that happens a lot, even though his vest clearly says not to pet him. If I was standing for a long time in an aisle, there's definitely a chance that Buddy would lay down. And I absolutely would not ask him to cover me in this situation because I'm not comfortable sitting on the floor right now, but if he were to cover me, of course he would be laying on the floor and getting exposed to anything that was there. When we got home, I wouldn't be able to take off his shoes because they're paws. He does have doggy shoes for hikes. I don't think I'd want him click click clacking in the grocery store and drawing attention to us. That'd be really cute. I guess, long story short, Buddy doesn't know to be careful in the grocery store, and I don't feel like there are a lot of precautions that I can take bringing him back home that wouldn't take a lot of effort on my part, and that's spoons that I just don't have. For full disclosure, I do think that I would be fine. I do think that maybe levels are low enough and odds are low enough that I presume I would be fine. But presume is not enough certainty for me when, again, the virus is still widely unknown, and also my body is still widely unknown. Sorry to repeat myself, but I think that's really important to reiterate. Did I mention not to trust me because I'm a rando on the internet? Did I mention this isn't medical advice? I think I did. There it is again. This wouldn't be a decision-making video if I didn't weigh some pros and cons. Of course, I bring Buddy to the grocery store despite all the hassles because he does so much good for me. So what are the cons of not bringing him? First of all, I'm in quarantine, just like everybody else. So going out right now is rare, and if I do go out, it's usually just to go to the grocery store. When I was thinking about bringing Buddy to the grocery store during quarantine, I was trying to consider what tasks he would and would not be able to do, and really just how much he actually would be able to help me when we were there. For migraine alert, he gives me so many hours of notice that if he were to check me before I left, I would definitely be able to get home in time for him to check me again and still give me plenty of notice. In terms of the grocery store, I'm much more concerned with pots and standing up for too long. And my dizziness and general off feeling can also be made a lot worse by all of the patterns that are going on in the grocery store. The two tasks that Buddy does the most often in the grocery store are to alert me that I'm near faint and to cover me so that the episode can be shorter and less severe. Those aren't the only two tasks that that he does for POTS. I'll throw a card up here for the video that I did that lists some of the other things that he does for POTS, but those are the two that pop up most often in the grocery store, so those are the two that I was considering the most when I was trying to make this difficult choice. I already mentioned earlier in the video that I would not be comfortable with him covering me because that would require that I sit on the floor and he lays over me, and of course during a pandemic that's not the safest thing to do. Given that I feel like there is a risk in bringing the dog to the store, and also the benefits of having the dog there are lowered, it started to tip the scale in this little risk-benefit analysis that I was doing. From there, it just became a matter of what do I think the odds are of me fainting at the store? And honestly, not that high. I'm really on top of my salt and water intake, and some days are worse than others. On the days that I'm feeling really well at home and I'm able to do chores, of course that would be a great day to break quarantine for a quick trip to the grocery store. But if it's the kind of day where I'm not even able to stand up from the breakfast table, maybe it's not the best day to go to the store. Or maybe I need to make sure that I eat a lot more salt and drink a lot more water before I try going. I did a video previously of the unexpected benefits of service dogs, and one of the benefits that I mentioned is that I got to learn my own diseases better. Buddy's advanced warning has really opened my eyes to some of the signs that I was getting before my attacks, like sweaty palms and a general anxious feeling. Sometimes I am able to notice ahead of time that I'm not feeling so well. I have to admit, at the grocery store, I'm not very good at noticing my own symptoms. Migraine comes with a ton of brain fog, among other things. So when I'm at the grocery store, it takes like all of the concentration that I have in my body and then some to be able to keep track of where I am. And especially when you consider the patterns and the lights and the stimulation, the people around, and usually I have people bothering me about the service dog too, it really is a lot for a migrainer to handle. And if I'm trying to keep track of all of these things, and if my migraine symptoms are getting triggered at the same time, I'm really not in the best situation to be trying to be my own POTS alerter. Anytime Buddy has gotten sick in the past and I felt it was best he didn't work, instead of bringing my service dog, I would just bring my service human. And that's how we've been getting through this quarantine. I would not feel comfortable going to the grocery store by myself because if I noticed a faint, I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But if I have my husband there and I feel kind of weird, I can always go hug him. And if I do faint, he'll be able to hold me up. That sounds really dramatic and risky, and it sounds like maybe I should be bringing the service dog instead because it seems a lot safer. But you have to remember, I'm in quarantine, so for the most part, we're not going out. For the most part, if I do go out, it's on a day that I feel really well. And also, we're used to this. This is our normal. I really felt like the decision to not work Buddy during this time lowered my chances the most of anything detrimental happening. It would be a bad long-term solution, but for these little tiny trips in this odd quarantine pandemic time, I felt it was a good choice for me. I feel like if I look at all of the odds and the worst case scenarios of each situation, this seemed like the one that lowered my chances of anything really detrimental happening. This, of course, is a very personal choice, and the choice that you make might be different from the choice that I make. The more information, the merrier. So if you could throw in the comments below whether or not you're working your service dog and what kinds of information factored into that decision, I think there are a lot of people who would love to hear about it. There are a lot of people who rely on their service dogs for literally life or death situations every single day. During this pandemic, I really do consider myself lucky that I am able to make the choice to bring a service human instead of a service dog. I feel lucky that I can make that decision without feeling like I'm jeopardizing my health or safety in any huge permanent way. But again, that said, your journey is different and your story is different. And I'm not making this video to convince you that you should not bring your service dog. Rather, I'm hoping that me being honest about my opinion and the choice that I made will make you feel more confident in the decision that you made. These are really big decisions that we have to make with a lot of factors to consider, and there is no right answer. So the more that we talk to each other and bounce ideas off each other, the safer we'll all be. I really hope that you found this helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. And of course, if you're interested in seeing more videos from me, hit subscribe. I post new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Regardless of whether you subscribe, thank you for joining me for this video today, and I hope to see you again in the future. Don't be a jerky. Something rhymes with jerky. I'm trying to come up with a rhyme to get you to subscribe that rhymes with jerky. Don't be a jerky to me. It's gonna make a killer end screen.